Okay, so in this video, I'm going to show you how to create an array of objects, how to also override methods. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, so first of all, we're going to create a class. The class will be of a book, right? So what kind of attributes does a book have? It probably has a string title, um, and maybe let's say an author, private string author. Okay, so then let's create some properties for these two attributes or instance variables. So that would be public string title, turn title. Oh, don't forget to capitalize your property. Okay, title equals value. Okay, so that's a property for the title. Now we need another property for the author. So public string author. And then here the same thing. Again, don't forget to capitalize your property name. Okay, so now we have our properties. Let's create a default constructor for the book. So it's public book, no arguments, and we'll set title equal to null, and we'll set author to null. Okay, so let's say we go to our book test class, and we want to create a object of type book, right? So that's book, and then we can call it maybe like obj book 1 equals new book, right? So here we invoke the default constructor, right? So we create an object um, of the book type here, and then we've set up a few properties, and the only method that we defined in our book class was the constructor. But let's say I type obj book 1, and then I type the access member operator, the dot. You see here we have all these other methods that are available to us: equals, get hashtag, get type. Here are the two properties we wrote, and then there's one here called toString, right? So let's say I click the toString method, and let's say I want to convert this object. Right now it's a book. I'm going to call this toString method to convert it into a string. So what happens when you do that? Let me show you. All right, so I did a console.writeLine statement, and the result of this operation here will generate a string, and that string will be displayed to the console. So let's see what it looks like. So Control F5. Okay, let's try again. All right, so it just shows the name of the class. That's it. Um, it's not very useful, right? We know it's a book, right? But we don't know anything else. So we can override this toString method. That way it can be a little bit more useful to us, give us some more information, something that we can actually work with, right? So let me show you how to do that. Okay, so the toString method is by default it is public, but here we're going to override it. Override. The return type of toString is a string, and the method is toString, right? Okay, so all that was typed in automatically for us. So this is what's happening. It is displaying the name of the base class. The base class is called object, and so it's just showing the name of the object, which isn't what we want. All right, so we can actually get rid of that. We can get rid of this too for now, and we can come up with our own toString that'll be a little bit more useful for us, right? So let's okay. So first of all, let's create a string variable called text. We'll initialize it with null. And then now let's create or let's concatenate to this variable something a little bit more useful than what was there before. All right, so text plus equals, and then maybe we can have something like title colon, and then concatenate or add to this string with the plus sign the title. Okay, now let's do it again. We'll keep adding to it, and then the author name, and then author. Okay, and then the last thing, since this method must return a string, we need to return everything we've done here. So then we'll return text. And then for now, let's change the constructor. We'll change the values here to something we can actually see on the screen instead of null. So maybe title default title, and then author will do something like John Doe. Okay, so we'll try that instead. Now we go back here. We've overridden the toString method. So let's see what happens. Control F5. All right, so now we have title, default title, author, John Doe. It's all on one line though. So we can fix that by using the new line operator, /n here, and then maybe /n there. Okay, so now let's try it. All right, so we got the new line, title, default title, author, John Doe. All right, so that's a little bit more useful than what we were getting before. All right, so that's how you override methods. So, and usually the toString method is the one you override most of the time. Okay, so first of all, what is an array? An array is a data structure that holds a collection of data elements that are of similar type. They could be simple primitive types like integer, double, string, or they could be complex reference types like the ones we define, like our book object, our employee class, things like that. So they can hold either objects or simple data types. Right, so let's say we want to create a array of books. Right, so the name of our array could be something like books. And whenever you access an individual element in an array, usually use an index, right? And you enclose that index in a set of brackets, right? So books 0, like this, would be the first book in our array. Actually, we'll make this lowercase. Then books, the next one, which is books 1. Problem with Microsoft Word, tries to capitalize everything for you. Books 3. Right, so our array is 0 based, right? So it starts off with 0, similar to the placeholders. So books, the first one is 0, 1, 2, and 3, right? And then for book 0, we could have something like the title is, let's say, The Godfather. The author is Mario Puzo. Let's say we have another book. The title is Interview with the Vampire. The author is Anne Rice. The next book could be, um, let's see, 1984. The author, George Orwell. And the last one could be title, The Cuckoo's Egg by Clifford Stoll. Right, so we have a collection of data here, and it can be accessed through the index. So book 0 would be this, book 1 would be this one, book 2 would be this, and book 3 would be that one. All right, so let's see how we can do that in C#. Okay, so here in our code, this is only one book, right? But now we want to work with arrays. We want a collection of books. So the first thing you're going to want to do is, let's get rid of this for now. First thing you want to do is declare a constant for the array size, right? Our array size, if we look here, the size is 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so int, and by convention, normally constants are capitalized, all the letters. So array size, and we'll make it equal to 4, right? And since it's a constant, once it's declared, it can no longer be changed, right? So the 4 will always remain, as the array size. And we can't go and remodify this later on. And with an array, you have to know the size of it before you use it. Right, so to declare an array, it's similar to the way we declare just one object. Just have to make a few changes. Right, so here, first of all, before the identifier, you need to put the the brackets, right? So the left bracket and the right bracket here. Right, so now we have an array. We look at the error here. Cannot implicitly convert type book to book array. So instead of the parentheses being here, we're going to put the brackets like this. But here we need to array creation must have array size or array initializer. So we already declared the array size here. So we'll just put that there in its place. Okay. So here we declared the array variable. Here we create the array. And then we assign this array to this variable. Okay, so this here is called the array creation expression. And here we did three things. First of all, we declared the array variable, which is this thing here. Then we create the array, which is this part here. And it uses, to create the array, we have to use the new keyword. And then finally we assign to the array variable, right? So the assignment operators here. Okay, so now that we've created our array, now we can access each element. But the thing is, there is no elements in this array. We haven't set anything up yet, right? We just set aside the memory so that way we can start storing our books in this collection here. Okay, so once we've created our array, I'm actually going to change the identifier here because we wrote this before with just one object. Now, since this is a set of multiple objects, I'm going to change this to something more appropriate, like let's just say books. There you go. Now that's the name of our array. We call it books. Okay, so then now we can set up each object and place it into the array. Right, the best way to do that would be through a for loop. So for int index will start at 0 while the index is less than, and now we have access to properties that are available to us through the array object, right? So we can, the most important property would be the length of the array, or the size, right? Length or size, same thing, right? So then that would be books dot, and now we have access to all these methods that we inherit from the array class. So the one we want is length, and then we're going to increment our index plus plus. Okay, so the first thing we want to do in the for loop is we want to create a book object and place it in the first element of the array. Right? So to access the first element, you type the name of the array, so books. The index, the first element is 0, but we already have a loop that will increment through all the indexes, so we can just use index instead of just using 0. And we set it equal to the new keyword and then book. Right, so this creates an object of type book, and it places that object into the first element of the array. The array holds book objects. Right, so let's say we just leave it like that, and then I want to display what is set up in the array in each element. So for that, you would need to also use a for loop. It'd be the same one pretty much. And then now we have our toString method that we can use to display the information that's stored in each element. Right, so let's see what we get when we do this. Right, so we create a new book, put the new book in the array, increment the index, put it in the second place, create a new one, and then in the third place, put another book until we reach 4. And then here we're going to display the information in all 4 elements. Okay, so let's Control F5. And they all have the same title. Title default, author John Doe. Right, so here we are displaying the elements in the array. And then here we are assigning the values to the array. Okay, so now we're ready to set up the title and author for each book object in our array. So the way to do that is, of course, we need to prompt the user to enter that information. All right, so one way to do that, of course, is console.write, and we can tell them something like enter title. And then we use the property, so books index dot title equals whatever the user decides to type. Okay, so now we'll get the title. Now let's do the same thing for the author. So console dot write enter author. Okay, so now we prompt the user to enter the title. User enters the title. Then we prompt the user to enter the author. Then the loop will repeat, create a new element for index 1, input the same information again. Now for index 2, which would be the third object, we'd set up the title and the author. And then finally for the fourth index, which is index 3, right? Because it's going from 0 to 3. Then we set that up, and then finally we'll display the values. Okay, so let's go ahead and run this application. Control F5. Okay, so now we're being prompted to enter the first title. So let's get our list here. I'm going to pin this to the screen. All right, so for book 0, which is the first one, we'll do The Godfather. The author is Mario Puzo. Okay, so then title for the next one is Interview with the Vampire. Author is Anne Rice. Next one is 1984. George Orwell. And then finally, The Cuckoo's Egg. Clifford Stowe. Then if I press, I'm going to make this a little larger. So if I press enter here, then it should display the data contained in the in our array now. So I go back to the program. Yeah, so we already finished executing everything in this for loop here. Now we're going to display everything in this one here. So then let me go ahead and press enter. All right, so then now we'll see the data contained in the array. A few issues with this program. First of all, we typed all the data here. The data is already visible to us, but then we're kind of printing out the same thing over again. Right, so we can fix that to make it a little neater. And I'll show you how to do that. Okay, so let's go ahead and close this out. And then what we can do here is, after we enter the author, we can clear the screen. To clear the screen, you would do console dot clear. Okay, so then now run it again. Let's just enter the first book, which was The Godfather. The author was Mario Puzo. Right, and it cleared out the screen. Unlike before, it had it just displayed enter title, enter author 4 times. Right, so now we cleared it out, so that way it's a little bit neater. Of course, we can do a little bit better with the display. So let me show you some other changes you can do to make your program a little neater. Let's close this out. And then here, it's kind of, we're losing track, or let's say you have to enter 20 books, and you're entering the data, and we don't know what book we're on. Right, so we can put maybe some sort of indicator to help the user keep track of how many books they've entered so far. Right, we can use the index to do that. So let's console dot right line. We'll put some sort of divider. Nothing too fancy. And then here, console dot right line. Here we'll put some space. Here we'll say something like book, and we'll display the index here. And then some space. And then the index is this variable here, so index. And most people don't really work with zero-based numbers, right? From 0 to 3. So let's make this a little bit more user-friendly. Let's do it instead from 0 to 3. Let's do from 1 to 4. That makes more sense, I guess, because we usually when we count from 1, 2, 3, 4 instead of 0, 1, 2, 3, right? So we can fix that on the display just by doing index plus 1. And then here we can try to get this a little more in the middle. Delete some of this space, and then that way our it's a little bit more lined up. And then we can get this divider that's here, paste it to the bottom. All right, so let's see how that looks. So then Control F5. You see, so now we have an indicator that says book 1. So let's enter this data again. The Godfather, author Mario Puzo. There you go. So by clearing out the screen, we make the program a little bit more readable. We're not cluttering the console with all kinds of text and stuff, but it still works, even though we're not seeing everything. Okay, so now let's run this same program through the debugger. We can see what's going on in the system. Okay. So let's say I put my breakpoint here. Maybe something like that. So now let's start the debugger, see what happens. Keep this guy here. Okay, let's step into it. All right, so then we go to the constructor. Then we set the title, default title, author John Doe. Or actually, oh, it went to the property, sorry. It sets the value. Then we go to the author, jump to the property, set the value. And then once we get to this little bracket here, then we should go back to book test. All right, so that was the creation of the object. Now let's step into this here, execute that, displays the line, displays book 1, displays the other divider. Now we're going to ask for the title. Now it's waiting for my input. All right, and then that input is being sent through the property. And then that line is done. Then the author name. Goes through the property. And then here, once this line executes, then the screen should be cleared out, right? And then the bracket here will be executed. Then the index is incremented. Right now it's at 0. Step through that. Now index is 1. Then the index condition is being evaluated. So that's 1. Is 1 less than book's length? Book's length is 4. This is a true statement. So then now we'll create the next book object. And then go to the constructor. Call the property. Set the default value. Same thing for the author. Okay, so the other thing I wanted to show you was the locals window with all the variables inside. All right, so here's our books array. If we expand on this, here in the code we've created we've placed two objects in the array so far. So the first object here was the Godfather, right? And then here we still have the default set up by the constructor, right? So we can see these as they change. All right, so let me step through this some more. So then now book 2, enter the title. All right, so then we're stepping through that. Enter the author. Oops. Okay. And then now I step into this. Okay, so now if I go back to the array, now we see element 1, the second one, all this is filled in now. And the same thing will happen for 2 and 3. And then we'll clear it out. And then the index will increment again. It's starting at 1, incremented, now it's 2. We verify the condition for the loop. So 2 is less than book's length, which book's length is 4. So then this will run 2 more times.